A single sentence can be a key turning a lock you never knew existed. For Eliza Holloway, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in her mother's medical bills, that sentence was a simple observation. For Gideon Pierce, a man insulated from the world by billions of dollars, it was a crack in the foundation of his entire life. She was just trying to get through her shift. He was just another faceless tycoon in a suit. But when she saw the ring on his finger, a flicker of a memory became an inferno that would threaten to burn down a century-old dynasty. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a casual remark in a cheap diner unraveled a web of lies, betrayal, and a secret that one of America's most powerful families thought was buried forever. The fluorescent lights of the corner booth, diner, hummed a monotonous tune, a sound Eliza Holloway knew better than her own heartbeat. It was the soundtrack to her life, the sizzle of burgers on the griddle, the clatter of cheap ceramic plates, the low murmur of conversations that never seemed to change. At 9:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, the diner was in its nightly lull, a brief respite between the dinner rush and the late-night crowd. Eliza leaned against the cool stainless steel counter, rolling her shoulders to work out a knot of exhaustion. Every muscle ached with a fatigue that was more than physical. It was the soul-deep weariness of watching her mother Laura slowly fade in a sterile beige hospital room. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Eliza from her thoughts. A man stepped inside, and an invisible curtain of silence seemed to fall over the diner. He wasn't just well-dressed, he was sculpted from a different material than the rest of the world. His suit, a charcoal grey, so dark it was nearly black, fit him with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. His shoes gleamed even under the diner's grimy lights. He had the kind of quiet, absolute confidence that doesn't need to be announced. It simply is. The few remaining patrons instinctively lowered their voices. He chose a booth in the corner, sliding onto the cracked vinyl seat with an economy of motion. Eliza grabbed a menu and a glass of water, her professional smile pasted on. "Welcome to the corner booth. Can I get you started with something?" The man didn't look at the menu. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of blue, met hers for a brief, dismissive moment. "Just coffee. Black." His voice was low and resonant, a cello in a room of tin whistles. "Coming right up," Eliza said, retreating to the counter. Her friend and fellow waitress Chloe sidled up to her. "Get a load of Mr. Moneybags. Thinks he's too good for a menu. $10, says he's Gideon Pierce." Eliza frowned as she poured the coffee. "Who?" "Gideon Pierce. Pierce Holdings International. They own half the downtown skyline. My dad used to be a foreman on one of their sites before he got laid off. That guy's picture is in the business section every other week. They say he's ruthless. Turned his family's millions into billions before he was 30. Eliza glanced over at the man. He was staring out the window, his profile sharp and severe against the neon-lit street. He looked less like a businessman and more like a predator resting between hunts. She picked up the cup and saucer. "Well, to me, he's just another customer who wants black coffee." She walked back to the booth and set the coffee down. "Here you are, sir." As he reached for the cup, his hand emerged from his cufflink-adorned sleeve, and on his right ring finger, nestled against his skin, was a ring that made Eliza's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't the size or the gleam of it that stopped her. It was the design. An intricate masculine signet ring made of a pale buttery gold. Etched into the flat face was a sigil, a stylized phoenix, its wings spread wide, with a single tiny sapphire set in its eye, sparkling like a captured star. The band itself was unique, carved to look like intertwined feathers. Eliza's mind reeled. She saw the same ring, not gleaming under a diner light, but resting in a small velvet-lined box on her mother's bedside table. Laura's ring was identical in every detail, down to the tiny, impossibly blue sapphire eye. It was her most cherished possession, the one thing she'd refused to sell, even when the medical bills became a tidal wave threatening to drown them. Her father, she'd always said, had given it to her on his deathbed. "It's a promise, Eliza," she would whisper, her voice thin and reedy. "A promise of what's right." The words tumbled out of Eliza's mouth before she could stop them, a quiet, stunned whisper. "Hi, sir. My mother has a ring just like yours." Gideon Pierce froze his hand, hovering over the coffee cup. He slowly retracted it, and his piercing blue eyes lifted to meet hers. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by a sudden, glacial intensity. He didn't speak. He simply stared, his gaze so sharp and analytical, it felt like he was dissecting her, searching for the punchline to a joke she wasn't telling. "Excuse me," he finally said, his voice, dropping an octave, becoming dangerously soft. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt Chloe's worried stare from across the room. She should have just walked away, kept her mouth shut. But the image of her mother's frail hand, clutching that identical ring, was burned into her mind. "The ring," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger. "On your hand. It's the same as my mother's. The phoenix, the little sapphire. Everything." A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, not surprise, not recognition, but something harder, darker. He slowly turned his hand over, examining the ring as if seeing it for the first time. "That's impossible," he stated. It wasn't a guess, it was a verdict. "But it's not," Eliza insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "She's had it my whole life. Her father gave it to her. It's one of a kind," he told her. Gideon Pierce placed his hand flat on the table, the ring, a silent, golden accusation. His gaze was cold steel. "This ring," he said, enunciating each word with chilling precision, "has been in the Pierce family for over 100 years. It was custom-made for my great-grandfather, Alaric Pierce. There is no other. There has never been another. You are mistaken." The finality in his tone felt like a slap. He was calling her a liar, or worse, a fool. The injustice of it piled on top of her exhaustion, and fear for her mother ignited a spark of defiance in her. "I'm not mistaken," she said, her voice low but firm. "I've held it in my hands 1,000 times. I know every detail on it. I could draw it from memory." He leaned back, a faint, condescending smile touching his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "A fascinating story. What is your name?" "Eliza. Eliza Holloway." "Well, Miss Holloway," he said, picking up his coffee cup and taking a slow, deliberate sip. "Your mother is either a liar or a thief, because the only way she has a ring like this is if it's the one that was stolen from my family 50 years ago." He set the cup down with a soft click. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of Eliza's world. Stolen. The word hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Her mother, the gentlest, most honest person she knew, a thief. The accusation was so absurd, so vile, it was like being told the sun rose in the west. Gideon Pierce reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and extracted 3 $100 bills, placing them on the table. It was more than she made in 2 shifts. It was an insult, a dismissal, for the coffee and your time. He said, his eyes already looking past her toward the door. He stood up, the power of his presence filling the small booth. He was already gone, moving on, leaving her in the wreckage of his words. As he walked toward the exit, Eliza found her voice. "She's not a thief. He paused at the door, his back to her. He didn't turn around, but his voice carried clearly across the quiet diner. "Then prove it." The bell chimed again, and he was gone, leaving Eliza standing in the middle of the corner booth, her heart pounding, the hum of the lights now sounding like a scream. The 3 crisp bills on the table felt like blood money. She hadn't just served coffee to a billionaire. She had stumbled into his story, and in doing so, she realized with a cold dread she may have just destroyed her own. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic lights and the anxious thumping of her own heart. Gideon Pierce's words echoed in her head, a liar or a thief. It was preposterous. Laura Holloway was a woman who would walk back into a store to return a few cents of extra change. The accusation was a poison dart, and Eliza felt its venom spreading through her. She found her mother sleeping, her face pale and sunken, against the pristine white of the hospital pillow. The ever-present beep of the cardiac monitor was a fragile, rhythmic reassurance. On the small bedside table next to a glass of water and a well-worn book of poetry sat the small, dark blue velvet box. With trembling hands, Eliza picked it up. The velvet was worn smooth in places. She opened the lid. There it was. The pale gold ring catching the low light from the hallway, the phoenix with its proud spread wings, and the eye a tiny sapphire that seemed to hold a universe of secrets. It was identical. There was no question. "Eliza, honey, is that you?" Laura's voice was weak, raspy. Eliza quickly shut the box and turned, forcing a smile. "Hey, Mom, I didn't mean to wake you. You're late. Rough shift." Laura's eyes, though clouded with illness, were still sharp, still full of a fierce love that had been Eliza's anchor her entire life. The usual. Eliza couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. How could she voice such a monstrous accusation to this frail woman? "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over by a very slow, very expensive truck," Laura said with a weak smile. The doctors were in. More talk of options. It all sounds the same. She shifted in the bed, wincing, and her eyes fell on the box in Eliza's hand. Her expression changed. The weariness was replaced by a familiar, guarded look. "You were looking at the ring." Eliza hesitated. "I was just thinking about it. About Dad." Laura's hand, thin and crisscrossed with blue veins, reached out, and she patted the mattress beside her. Eliza sat down. "Your grandfather," Laura corrected gently as she always did. "It was my father who gave it to me, not yours." Eliza's father had been a good man, a mechanic who died in a workshop accident when she was 10, leaving behind nothing but debts and happy memories. The ring predated him. "Right, Granddad," Eliza said, her mind racing. "Mom, tell me about him again. About the ring." Laura's gaze drifted to the window to the dark sky outside. "There's not much to tell that you haven't heard. My father Owen was a quiet man, a brilliant man, an engineer. He worked for a big corporation back east. He said the ring was payment for a promise that was broken by powerful men." "What kind of promise?" Eliza pressed, trying to keep her voice casual. "He never said, only that it was about recognizing what was right. He made me swear to never sell it to keep it safe. He said one day it might be the only proof we have." "Proof of what?" A flicker of fear, real and raw, crossed Laura's face. She looked at Eliza, her eyes pleading. "Leave it be, Eliza. It's an old story. A sad story. It has nothing to do with us anymore. Some doors are best left closed." "But, Mum, what if someone else has a reason to open that door?" The words were out before she could stop them. Laura's grip on her hand tightened. "What do you mean? What happened?" Eliza saw the spike on the heart monitor and cursed herself. Nothing. It's nothing, just a stupid thing at work. She couldn't burden her mother with this. Not now. She needed to protect her. But the seed of doubt had been planted, a promise that was broken by powerful men. Who were they, and what did any of it have to do with Gideon Pierce? Miles away, in a penthouse apartment that seemed to float above the city, Gideon Pierce stood before a floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights spread out below him like a carpet of scattered diamonds. He held a glass of scotch, the amber liquid untouched. He hadn't been able to shake the encounter at the diner. The girl, Eliza Holloway, her wide, honest eyes, her absolute certainty. My mother has a ring just like yours. It was ludicrous. And yet... He walked over to a heavy mahogany desk and switched on a green-shaded lamp. From a locked drawer he retrieved a leather-bound folio. The Pierce family archives. It was a curated, sanitized history, of course, but it was all he had. He opened it to the section on family heirlooms. There, on a yellowed page, was a photograph of the ring. His ring. The description was clear. The Phoenix Signet. Commissioned in 1922 by Alaric Pierce. Forged by artisan Michel Dubois of Paris. Unique design. Symbol of the Pierce family's rebirth from the ashes of the 1921 financial panic. Sole ownership passed down to the male heir of each generation. His father had given him the ring on his 21st birthday. It represents our resilience, Gideon. He'd said, his voice thick with pride. We always rise. Never forget that. Gideon's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. Genevieve Adler. He answered. Adler. You're still up, came a crisp, no-nonsense voice. Genevieve Adler was more than his lawyer. She was his fixer, the executor of his will and the keeper of his secrets. Something has come up, Gideon said, his voice tight. I need you to run a background check. Discreetly. Another hostile takeover. A person. Her name is Eliza Holloway. She works at a diner on 6th Street called The Corner Booth. Her mother's name is Laura Holloway. I want to know everything. Financials, family history, where they came from, who their people were. Everything. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Genevieve was too professional to ask why, but he could feel her curiosity. Is this a personal or professional matter? Gideon looked at the ring on his finger, the phoenix staring back at him with its cold sapphire eye. I'm not sure yet, he admitted, a rare moment of uncertainty. But it has the potential to become problematic. He thought back to the story his grandfather used to tell a story, told only in hushed tones after a few too many brandies. About Alaric Pierce's younger brother Daniel, how Daniel had betrayed the family, tried to steal Alaric's designs for a new kind of turbine engine, and in his greed had taken the spare signet ring Alaric had foolishly commissioned. Daniel, the story went, was disowned, cast out. And the ring was lost with him, a symbol of treachery. But the official family history, the one in the folio, never mentioned a second ring. It never mentioned a brother named Daniel. It was a ghost story, a family legend. Until now. Find out who Laura Holloway's father was. Gideon commanded, his voice hardening again, the moment of uncertainty passing. I want his name. I want to know what he did for a living. And I want to know if he ever, for any reason, crossed paths with my family. He hung up the phone. The waitress had said her grandfather gave her mother the ring. A quiet engineer. Broken promises. Powerful men. For the first time in a very long time, Gideon Pierce felt a sliver of something other than control. It felt like walking on thin ice, hearing the first faint crackle of it, giving way beneath his feet. He had told the girl to prove it. But now he realized with a grim certainty he had to do the same. He had to prove his own story was the truth. 3 days later, the name arrived in a single encrypted line of text from Genevieve Adler Owen Calloway. The name meant nothing to Gideon. He ran it through the private databases of Pierce Holdings, cross-referencing it with employee records, contractor lists, and financial dealings going back a century. Nothing. No Owen Calloway had ever worked for or with his family's company. He felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by suspicion. It was too clean. He was stewing in his office, a vast expanse of glass and steel on the 80th floor, when Genevieve herself appeared at his door. She was a severe woman in her 50s, always dressed in impeccably tailored suits, her grey hair pulled back in a tight chignon. She held a thin file. "You're not going to like this," she said, forgoing any greeting. She placed the file on his desk. Gideon opened it. Inside were public records. A birth certificate for Laura Ann Calloway, born in Wilmington, Delaware. Father Owen Calloway. Mother Helen Calloway. And then another document, a patent application from 1968. Inventor Owen Calloway. Invention a novel gearing system for high-torque industrial turbines. Assignee of patent none. Application withdrawn. Gideon's blood ran cold. He recognized the schematic. It was a primitive but unmistakable precursor to the Pierce Mark III turbine, the very invention that had catapulted his grandfather's company from a regional player into a global powerhouse in the early 70s. The invention credited solely to his grandfather, William Pierce. The application was withdrawn on October 12, 1968. Genevieve said, her voice flat. According to banking records I accessed on October 14, 1968, Owen Calloway made a one-time cash deposit of $50,000 into his savings account, a significant sum for an engineer at the time. He quit his job a week later, moved his family, and never worked in engineering again. He died of a heart attack 6 years later, at the age of 42. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. A non-disclosure agreement, a cash payoff, a brilliant idea bought and buried under the Pierce name. So he was bought off. Gideon said the words, tasting like ash. My grandfather stole his invention and paid him to keep quiet. It appears that way, Genevieve confirmed. The $50,000 was likely positioned as a consulting fee to keep it legal. There's no paper trail linking it directly to the patent, of course. Your grandfather was meticulous. And the ring? Gideon asked, looking at his own hand. That, Genevieve said, is where it gets strange. I found the jeweler who bought the assets of Dubois et Fils of Paris. The records are ancient, but their ledgers were like your grandfather meticulous. In 1922, Alaric Pierce commissioned 2 identical Phoenix signet rings. He paid for both. There's a note in the margin in the artisan's hand. She slid a translated copy across the desk. It read, "One for the builder, one for the dreamer. May they fly together." 2 rings. The family ghost story wasn't a story. It was true. His great-uncle Daniel existed. So Calloway didn't steal the ring, Gideon murmured, thinking aloud. Daniel Pierce, the disowned brother, must have given it to him. But why? As a thank you, a token for a friend, or something more? The puzzle was no longer about a simple diner waitress. It was about the very bedrock of his family's legacy. It was built not just on resilience but on a lie. The knowledge was a corrosive acid in his gut. He had to speak to her again. Eliza was wiping down the counter at the end of another grueling shift when the bell on the door chimed. Her heart sank. It was him. Gideon Pierce didn't enter the diner this time. He stood in the doorway, the city lights framing him like a dark halo. He was dressed more casually in dark trousers and a cashmere sweater, but he still radiated an unapproachable aura of power. "Ms. Holloway," he said, his voice quiet but carrying. "I need to speak with you." Chloe shot her a nervous look. "Eliza, you don't have to." But Eliza knew she did. She untied her apron and hung it on its hook. "It's okay. I'll be right back." She stepped out into the cool night air. The street was loud with the sounds of the city, a stark contrast to the tense silence that fell between them. "Your mother's father." Gideon began getting straight to the point. His name was Owen Calloway. It wasn't a question. Eliza flinched. How did he know that? Yes. What of it? He was an engineer. In 1968, he filed a patent for a turbine gear system. Gideon watched her face, carefully gauging her reaction. Eliza's mind went blank. She knew her grandfather was an engineer, but the details were a fog. Her mother never spoke of his work, only of his sadness. "I don't know anything about that," she said honestly. "I think you do." Gideon countered, his voice sharp with impatience. "Or your mother does. My grandfather, William Pierce, launched a turbine based on an identical design a few years later. It made my family a fortune. Calloway withdrew his patent and accepted a cash payment. This isn't about a stolen ring anymore, is it, Ms. Holloway? This is about a shakedown. Is that your plan? Use this old story to leverage a payday for your mother's medical bills?" The accusation was so cynical, so cruel, it knocked the air from her lungs. Tears of pure rage and frustration sprang to her eyes. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "You stand there in your $1,000 sweater looking down on us. My mother is fighting for her life. You think this is about money. This is about her honor. The honor of a man you just admitted your family probably robbed." For the first time, Gideon looked taken aback. He saw not a schemer, but a daughter pushed to her breaking point. "My grandfather told my mother that ring was proof." Eliza continued, her voice rising. "Proof that he was wronged. He didn't take a payoff, he was threatened, forced to sign away his life's work, to protect his family from men like your grandfather. That money wasn't a payment. It was hush money to ensure he never spoke of it again." She was channeling her mother's long-held, unspoken pain. The words felt true, solid, righteous. Gideon was silent for a long moment, the sounds of the city rushing in to fill the space between them. His own certainty was eroding, replaced by the disquieting possibility that the waitress's version of the story, a tale of threats and coercion, was closer to the truth than the sanitized version of a simple business transaction he had constructed. "There were 2 rings," he said, his voice losing its hard edge. "My great-grandfather had 2 made. One for him and one for his brother, Daniel. The family story is that Daniel was a traitor who was cast out." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "Was your grandfather friends with a man named Daniel Pierce?" Eliza stared at him, bewildered. "Daniel Pierce, I've never heard that name in my life." They were at an impasse. 2 families, 2 rings, and 2 completely different histories that intersected at a single disputed point in the past. One story of a clean, if ruthless, business deal, another of theft and intimidation. And at the center of it all, a ghost named Daniel Pierce, and a ring that was supposed to be a promise. "My mother has the ring," Eliza said, her resolve hardening. "You have your story, I have mine, and I'm going to find out which one is true." Gideon gave a single sharp nod. The condescension was gone, replaced by a grudging respect. "So am I." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the city's shadows, leaving Eliza with the chilling realization that their quest for the truth was now inextricably and dangerously linked. The confrontation with Gideon Pierce left Eliza shaken but resolute. She had defended her family's honor, but his questions echoed in her mind. Daniel Pierce. The name was a blank slate. She returned to the hospital the next day with a new sense of urgency. She found Laura sitting up, looking a little stronger than the day before. The poetry book was open on her lap. "Mum," Eliza began, pulling a chair close. "We need to talk. For real this time. No more secrets." Laura sighed a long, weary sound and closed the book. "I knew this day would come. Seeing you with the box. I knew you wouldn't let it go." She looked at her daughter, her eyes full of a deep, ancient sorrow. "What did he say to you?" "He?" Eliza asked, feigning ignorance. "Don't play coy, Eliza," the man from the diner. "You think a man like Gideon Pierce makes a scene, and it doesn't get noticed. Chloe called me. She was worried sick." Eliza's shoulders slumped. "He found me. He knows about Grandad Owen. He thinks we're trying to blackmail him. He thinks Grandad sold his invention to the Pierce family." Laura's expression hardened. "Sold it, is that what they call it?" She scoffed a bitter, rattling sound. "Your grandfather was a genius, Eliza. A gentle, trusting soul who thought the world worked on merit and good faith. He was working at a large firm, a competitor to Pierce Industries at the time. He developed his turbine gearing system on his own time. It was his masterpiece." She paused, her gaze, distant, lost in the memory. "He made the mistake of mentioning it to a colleague trusting him. That colleague left the company 2 months later for a senior position at Pierce Industries. 6 months after that, your grandfather received a visit from 2 men. They weren't lawyers. They were persuaders. They worked for William Pierce." The sterile hospital room suddenly felt cold. "What did they do?" Eliza whispered. "They didn't lay a hand on him," Laura said, her voice dropping. "They were smarter than that. They laid out photographs on our kitchen table. Pictures of me playing in the schoolyard. Pictures of your grandmother leaving the grocery store. They told him what a beautiful family he had. And they told him it would be a shame if something were to happen to them. Then they put a stack of papers in front of him. A non-disclosure agreement and a contract assigning all rights to his invention to a shell corporation owned by Pierce Industries. And an envelope full of cash. The story was uglier than Eliza could have imagined. This wasn't business. It was gangster tactics. "He signed everything," Laura continued, her voice trembling. "What choice did he have? He took the money because refusing it would have been an act of defiance, and he was too scared to defy them. We moved a week later. He was a broken man, Eliza. They didn't just steal his work, they stole his soul. He died 6 years later, but the truth is, they killed him that day in our kitchen." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. She finally understood the deep well of sadness in her mother, the fear behind her warnings. "But the ring, Mom," Eliza pressed gently. "Where does the ring come into it? Who is Daniel Pierce?" Laura flinched at the name, a genuine startled reaction. "Where did you hear that name?" "Gideon told me. He said his great-grandfather had 2 rings made, one for himself and one for his brother Daniel, who was disowned." Laura was silent for a full minute, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Daniel, Owen never said the name Pierce. He only ever called him my friend. His only friend in that terrible time." She began to recount a different part of the story, one she'd never shared. After Owen was forced out, he fell into a deep depression. But one man sought him out. a man who introduced himself only as Daniel. He was a drifter, an outcast, but he had an artist's soul and a hatred for the kind of corporate greed that had destroyed Owen. He had heard what happened to Owen through the engineering grapevine. This Daniel, Laura recounted, told your grandfather that he too had been betrayed by a powerful family. He understood what it was to have everything stolen by your own blood. They became friends, two broken men finding solace in each other's company. Before Daniel left town for good, he gave Owen the ring. She looked at Eliza, her eyes intense. He told Owen this was meant to symbolize a shared dream between brothers. It was forged in hope and tainted by greed. It belongs to the wronged, not the wrongdoer. Keep it as proof that integrity has a value that money can't buy. One day, the phoenix will rise for the right person. Owen cherished that ring more than the invention itself. It was a symbol that he wasn't alone in his suffering. So Daniel Pierce wasn't a traitor. He was another victim, and he had given the ring his own birthright to another wronged man as an act of solidarity. The story was so much more profound, so much more tragic than Gideon's cold family ledger. At the same time, Gideon was in his family's ancestral home, a sprawling stone estate an hour outside the city. He rarely came here. It felt more like a museum than a home filled with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. In the library, a room panelled in dark wood that smelled of old paper and polish, he met his cousin, Robert Pierce. Robert was a few years older with a practiced smile and the easy charm of a man who had never worked a day in his life. He managed the family's charitable foundation, a role that required him to attend galas and cut ribbons. "Gideon, to what do we owe the honor?" Robert said, pouring 2 glasses of brandy. "Tired of the concrete jungle. I'm looking for information." "Robert," Gideon said, cutting to the chase. "About great-uncle Daniel." Robert's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Daniel, the black sheep, that old ghost story. What's gotten into you?" "I have reason to believe the story is true, and I need to know the details. The real details, not the sanitized version." Robert swirled the brandy in his snifter, suddenly looking thoughtful. "Well, you know the legend. He was the younger brother, the artist, the dreamer. Alaric was the pragmatist, the builder. Daniel apparently accused Alaric of stealing his ideas for the company's early successes. Tried to stage a boardroom coup. When it failed, he vanished, but not before stealing a valuable ring and supposedly selling company secrets to a rival. Robert sighed dramatically. A classic tale of sibling rivalry and betrayal. It's why the line of succession has always been so rigidly defined, to prevent another Daniel. This was the story Gideon had always known, but hearing it now, it felt thin, theatrical, a convenient narrative to justify Alaric's consolidation of power. "And you believe that?" Gideon asked. "Why shouldn't I?" "It's our history," Robert said with a shrug. "It's a bit dramatic, sure, but it explains why the family closed ranks, why Grandpa William was so aggressive in his business dealings. He was protecting the family legacy from vultures from another betrayal." He leaned forward, his voice conspiratorial. Why the sudden interest? Did one of his descendants crawl out of the woodwork looking for a handout? The question was casual, but the look in Robert's eyes was sharp, probing. Gideon felt a sudden instinctual distrust. Robert had always seemed vapid, but perhaps that was a carefully constructed facade. "It's a private matter," Gideon said, his voice clipped. Of course," Robert said, leaning back, the charming smile returning. "Well, if you want to dig up old bones, be my guest. The old family papers are in the West Wing study. Gramps Williams' private correspondence. Knock yourself out. Just don't be surprised if the ghost you find is uglier than you imagined. Gideon left Robert with his brandy and went to the study. The room was dusty, unused for years. He found the boxes of letters tied with faded ribbon. For hours he sorted through them, reading his grandfather's elegant cursive script. Most of it was business. But then he found a series of letters from the late 1960s addressed to his grandfather's head of security. The content made him feel ill. There were updates on the surveillance of a man named Owen Calloway, reports on his daughter's school schedule, his wife's daily routine, and then a final chilling memo. Subject Calloway has been neutralized. Asset secured. He is no longer a threat. Neutralized. Asset secured. Eliza Holloway's story was true. It was all true. His family's fortune was built on theft and cemented with threats. The weight of the discovery was crushing. But as he continued to sift through the papers, he found something else. Something that didn't fit either his story or Eliza's. It was a single folded note, separate from the letters tucked into the back of a ledger. It was in his grandfather William's handwriting, but it was frantic, almost illegible. He knows. R found him. He can ruin everything. Daniel is the key. Must protect the name. The note was undated. Who was he, and who was R. Robert? It seemed too convenient. And what did it mean? Daniel is the key. Daniel was supposed to be a ghost, a long-vanished traitor. But this note, written decades after Daniel's disappearance, spoke of him as a present active threat. Gideon stood in the dusty, silent study, holding two conflicting testaments. In one hand, the sordid truth of his grandfather's crime against Owen Calloway. In the other, a cryptic note that suggested a deeper, more complex conspiracy was at play. The story was no longer just about his grandfather and Eliza's. There was a third player, a hidden thread. And the name of that thread was Daniel. The discovery of his grandfather's note threw Gideon into a state of focused obsession. He knows. R found him. Daniel is the key. It was a cipher, and Gideon knew he couldn't crack it alone. The animosity between him and Eliza had melted away, replaced by the grim reality that they were the only two people with a stake in the complete truth. He found her where he knew she'd be, in the hospital cafeteria, staring into a cup of coffee with the same haunted expression he saw in the mirror. He sat down opposite her, placing a thin file on the table between them. "Your mother was right," he said, his voice devoid of its usual authority, filled instead with a quiet gravity. "About everything. The threats, the coercion. My grandfather put your family through hell." He pushed the file forward. It contained the copies of the surveillance reports on the Calloway family. "This is the proof." Eliza opened the file, her hands trembling as she read the cold clinical descriptions of her mother as a little girl being watched. Her face paled. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of vindication and horror. "Why are you showing me this? Because my story is falling apart, and so is yours," Gideon said. "There's more to it." He told her about the note. Daniel is the key. It was written by my grandfather, William, long after your grandfather was silenced. He was scared of someone who knew the truth about Daniel. Eliza frowned. But Daniel gave my grandfather the ring. He was an outcast, a victim like Owen. "That's what he told your grandfather," Gideon countered. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if Daniel's disappearance wasn't just about him being cast out? We have two stories, yours and mine, but they're both based on what we were told by people who were themselves betrayed or lying. We need a primary source, an objective truth. "Where do we find that?" Eliza asked, the weight of a multi-generational conspiracy settling on her shoulders. "The rings." Gideon said, a spark of inspiration in his eyes. They're the one constant. They're the origin point. My great-grandfather Alaric commissioned them from a Parisian artisan, Michel Dubois. The business is gone, but I found the firm that acquired its assets, and more importantly, its records. The ledgers. In Paris. Eliza's heart sank. That was a world away. I had the relevant pages scanned and sent over this morning, Gideon said, tapping his phone. The high-resolution images are waiting in my office. I need another set of eyes. Your eyes. You know your ring better than anyone. An hour later, Eliza found herself in a place she could never have imagined, Gideon Pierce's office on the 80th floor. The silence was absolute, the view of the city breathtaking. On a massive screen that covered one wall was a high-resolution image of a page from an old leather-bound ledger. The script was elegant, spidery French. A translated transcript scrolled beside it. They pored over the entry for Alaric Pierce's 1922 commission. As Genevieve had discovered, it listed 2 identical rings. But as they zoomed in on the artisan's original French notes, Eliza saw something the translator had missed. The translator's note read, "One for the builder, one for the dreamer." But the original French was more specific. Eliza had taken 4 years of French in high school, and while she was rusty, one phrase jumped out at her. L'un pour le bâtisseur de l'Empire, l'autre pour le gardien de l'âme. That's not dreamer, Eliza said, slowly pointing at the screen. Gardien de l'âme. It means guardian of the soul. Gideon zoomed in, reading the phrase. Guardian of the soul. He repeated the words, feeling heavy and significant. A builder of an empire and a guardian of its soul. It wasn't a rivalry. It was meant to be a partnership, a balance. This changed everything. Alaric and Daniel weren't meant to be competitors. They were meant to be 2 halves of a whole. The story of Daniel's betrayal was a complete fabrication. As they scanned further down the page, Gideon noticed a small annotation next to the entry, added in a different hand, and with different ink. It was dated 1945. "What's this?" he murmured, enlarging the note. The French was spidery and difficult to read. Reçu une lettre de Monsieur Daniel Pierce. The note began. Received a letter from Mr. Daniel Pierce. Gideon translated haltingly. He asks for a modification to the second ring, to the inside of the band. He is no longer a Pierce. He is something else. Gideon and Eliza exchanged a look. No longer a Pierce, Eliza whispered. He changed his name, Gideon realized. When he was cast out, he abandoned the family name entirely. The note continued. Il a demandé que j'inscrive un nom. Le nom Owen. He asked me to inscribe a name. Gideon read his voice, catching. The name Owen. Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Owen, my grandfather's name. But this was in 1945. My grandfather wouldn't have met Daniel for another 20 years. It's not your grandfather's name, Gideon said, a sudden shocking realization dawning on him. He typed furiously on his keyboard, pulling up his family's genealogy records, going back further than he ever had before. His fingers flew, his mind racing. He found his great-grandfather, Alaric Pierce. Then his great-grandmother, Beatrice. And then he found her family tree. Her maiden name was Beaumont. And her father, Alaric's father-in-law, his name was Owen Beaumont, a wealthy shipping magnate who had bankrolled Alaric's early ventures, who had died in 1944. The truth hit them both like a physical blow. The inscription wasn't for Eliza's grandfather, it was a memorial. The ring, Eliza breathed, piecing it together. The ring wasn't for 2 brothers to share, it was for a father and son. Alaric Pierce and his son, William, my grandfather. No, Gideon said, his eyes wide with the horrifying clarity of the truth. Alaric didn't have a son named William in 1922. His son William was born in 1925. In 1922, Alaric Pierce had one child, a son born in 1905, his firstborn son. He clicked one last time, and a black and white photograph filled the screen. It was a formal portrait of two young men, both handsome and proud. One was clearly a young Alaric Pierce. The other, the dreamer, the guardian of the soul, was his brother. Underneath the photograph was the caption, Alaric and Daniel Pierce, 1921. And beneath that, in the official genealogical record, was the final devastating piece of the puzzle. The entry for Daniel Pierce listed his full name, Daniel Owen Pierce. Daniel was the Owen the ring was inscribed for. It wasn't a memorial to his father-in-law. He was reclaiming his middle name, the only part of his identity his brother couldn't take from him. The twist was so profound, so complete, that the room fell silent. The entire family history was a lie. Daniel wasn't the younger brother. Based on his birth year, he was the older brother. He should have been the heir. Alaric was the younger son, the builder. And William Pierce Gideon's grandfather wasn't Alaric's only son. He was the second son. Daniel was Alaric's firstborn. No, wait. Gideon looked at the birth dates again. Daniel born 1905. William born 1925. That couldn't be right. They weren't brothers. Alaric and Daniel were brothers. But William wasn't Daniel's brother. He was his nephew. The story they'd been chasing was wrong. The players were wrong. Eliza's grandfather hadn't met a random outcast. He had met Daniel Owen Pierce, the true disinherited heir to the Pierce fortune. And Daniel hadn't given him a token of solidarity. He had given him the ring, his own ring, inscribed with his own name for safekeeping. It was a piece of evidence, a dormant claim to an empire. And William Pierce Gideon's grandfather hadn't just stolen an invention from Owen Calloway. He had done it to suppress a man who had been in contact with the one person on earth who could challenge his own father's, and therefore his own legitimacy, his uncle Daniel Pierce. The note he knows. Found him. Daniel is the key. Snapped into focus. It was Owen Calloway. Was likely Robert's father or grandfather, another part of the conspiracy. And Daniel was the key because his existence and his connection to Calloway threatened to unravel the foundational lie upon which William Pierce's entire life and fortune were built. They hadn't just silenced an inventor. They were silencing a witness. The truth pieced together from the artisan's ledger was more corrupt than they had ever imagined. Daniel Owen Pierce, the rightful heir, had been systematically erased from history. Gideon's grandfather, William, had silenced Owen Calloway, not over a simple invention, but to bury the foundational lie of their family's power. It became terrifyingly clear that Gideon's cousin Robert knew this dirty secret and was positioning himself to use it as a weapon in a corporate power play. There was only one place to force a reckoning: the annual Pierce Foundation Charity Gala, Robert's personal stage. For Eliza, her mother's presence was non-negotiable. This fight was no longer just about uncovering the truth, it was about delivering justice, and for that to happen, the victim's voice had to be heard. The grand ballroom glittered with false brilliance, a perfect setting for the unmasking. Robert was in his element, the charming, benevolent host. That was until he saw Gideon and Eliza cutting a path directly toward him. His practiced smile became a brittle facade. "Robert," Gideon began, his voice low and cold, cutting through the pleasantries. "The games are over. We know about Daniel Owen Pierce, the true heir." Robert scoffed, preparing a condescending dismissal. "Gideon, you've clearly been listening to fairy tales from a—" He was cut off by a woman's voice, weak but amplified by a microphone that sliced through the ballroom's polite chatter. His fairy tale cost my father his life. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to the entrance where Laura Holloway sat in a wheelchair, her gaze locked on Robert with an intensity that defied her frailness. William Pierce destroyed my father because he was friends with the honorable man your family threw away, Laura declared. My father was forced to keep your secret. I will not. As gasps rippled through the stunned crowd, the massive screens on stage meant to display photos of the Foundation's good works flickered. Eliza held up her phone, and the damning image from the Parisian Ledger filled the screens for all to see, the entry detailing the commission for 2 rings, and the name to be inscribed within the second Owen. Trapped, Robert stared from Laura's accusing face to the irrefutable proof on the screens. He was cornered by a ghost from the past and evidence set in stone. Gideon stepped forward, his voice ringing with chilling authority. My family's legacy is built on a lie, he announced to the captive audience. A lie my grandfather silenced a man to protect, and a lie my cousin, he turned pinning Robert with a glare, planned to use for his own personal gain. The public accusation pushed Robert over the edge. His carefully constructed composure shattered into pure, unrestrained rage. You fool, Gideon, he hissed, forgetting the live microphone just inches from his mouth. I was trying to protect us. I knew the truth, and I kept it buried. You and your pathetic little waitress have ruined everything. The confession, amplified for all to hear, echoed in the dead silence of the ballroom. In a single self-incriminating breath, Robert had confirmed a century of corruption and authored his own spectacular downfall. He stood alone, exposed under the glittering chandeliers, the king of a corrupt castle that had just crumbled to dust around him. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind of headlines and resignations. The Pierce dynasty was shaken, but in the ensuing quiet, it was being reborn, not broken. Weeks later, in a sun-drenched private hospital suite, a fragile peace had settled. Laura Holloway, looking out over a green garden, had a light in her eyes that Eliza hadn't seen in years. The weight of a lifetime of secrets had finally been lifted. Gideon Pierce entered the room quietly, no longer an untouchable tycoon but a man humbled by the truth. He didn't offer empty apologies. Instead, he placed a leather-bound document on the table beside Laura's bed. The Daniel Owen Pierce Foundation, he said, his voice steady and sincere. It will exist to fund the independent inventors and artists my family tried to crush. A significant portion of my family's fortune will serve as its endowment, with the estate of Owen Calloway as its first honorary beneficiary. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. It was more than restitution. It was justice forged into a new legacy. Laura simply reached out and placed her hand over Gideon's. You have honored him, she whispered. You have honored them all. Gideon then looked at Eliza, pulling his own phoenix ring from his finger and placing it next to the one that had started it all. The 2 rings, twin flames of pale gold, lay side by side, finally reunited. One for the builder, one for the guardian, he said, his gaze locking with hers. I can rebuild the company, but it has been missing its soul for a century. Help me bring it back, Eliza. It was an offer not of money or power, but of purpose. Looking at the 2 ring symbols of a promise, finally kept Eliza saw a clear path forward. Yes, she said, her voice firm and her heart full. Let's give them a legacy to believe in. A single sentence in a late-night diner set in motion a chain of events that rewrote history. Eliza Holloway, a waitress who fought for her mother's honor, proved that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a power that no fortune can suppress. And Gideon Pierce, a billionaire, trapped in a gilded cage of lies, discovered that true wealth isn't about what you inherit, but about the integrity you choose to build. Their story reminds us that every family has its secrets, and that it sometimes takes the courage of an outsider to bring the truth to light, allowing the phoenix to finally rise from the ashes. If this story of truth, justice, and the incredible power of one person's voice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story that's more than just fiction. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life dramas that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Click that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for listening.
No doctor could save the millionaire's son until a humble waitress stepped forward and did the impossible, leaving everyone speechless and the father in tears. Before we begin, I need to ask you something important. If you don't follow our channel right now, algorithms might keep us apart forever. Your likes, comments, and shares are the only way we can stay connected. Don't let this be our last meeting. Hit that follow button now. Now, let's dive into the story. Marcus Sinclair adjusted his Italian silk tie for the third time in 10 minutes. His jaw clenched as he watched his 7-year-old son Timothy struggle with his crutches across the marble floor of Sinclair Medical Center. The irony wasn't lost on him, owning the most advanced private medical facility on the East Coast, yet being powerless to help his own child walk normally. Mr. Sinclair, the Tokyo investors are waiting in conference room A, his assistant Rebecca whispered, her voice barely audible in the sterile hallway lined with awards and accolades that suddenly felt meaningless. Tell them I need 5 more minutes, Marcus replied, his steel-grey eyes never leaving Timothy as the boy paused to rest, his small hands gripping the crutches with determination that both broke and strengthened his father's heart simultaneously. Doctor. Harrison approached with the latest test results, his expression already telegraphing disappointment. The experimental treatment from Switzerland showed no significant improvement, Marcus. I'm afraid we've exhausted most conventional options. Marcus's hands curled into fists. 3 years of searching, consulting with specialists from Harvard to Mayo Clinic, spending millions on cutting-edge treatments, and still his son faced each day with courage that humbled the most powerful CEO in the city. Timothy's condition, a rare neurological disorder affecting his motor skills, had stumped every expert they'd consulted. "Daddy, can we get lunch at that place with the really good grilled cheese?" Timothy asked, his bright smile masking any frustration he might feel about his limitations. "Of course, buddy. Anything you want?" Marcus replied, scooping Timothy into his arms, crutches and all. The boy's laughter echoed through the corridor, a sound more precious than any profit margin Marcus had ever achieved. They arrived at Rosie's Diner 20 minutes later, a modest establishment that Timothy had discovered during one of their medical appointments nearby. Marcus felt overdressed in his $3,000 suit among the vinyl booths and checkered floors, but Timothy's excitement made any discomfort worthwhile. "Welcome to Rosie's. Table for 2? The voice was warm, melodious, with an undertone of intelligence that made Marcus look up from his phone for the first time since entering. Emma Thompson stood before them, order pad in hand, her honey-blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard black uniform, but something about her posture suggested she belonged somewhere far more sophisticated than this humble diner. Her emerald eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond her apparent 20-something years. "Yes, our usual table by the window," Marcus replied curtly, already reaching for his phone again. "You must be Timothy," Emma said, crouching down to the boy's eye level with natural ease. "I've heard you make the best grilled cheese recommendations in the entire city." Timothy giggled, immediately charmed. "Daddy says I'm an expert because I've tried grilled cheese everywhere." A connoisseur, Emma said seriously, as if discussing fine wine. That's very impressive. I bet you know exactly how the cheese should melt, don't you? Undossen, as they walked to the table, Marcus noticed Emma's stride, confident, purposeful, almost clinical. She moved with the precision of someone accustomed to high-pressure environments, not the casual gait he'd expect from a small-town waitress. "Can I help you with those?" Emma asked Timothy, gesturing to his crutches with matter-of-fact kindness rather than the awkward pity most adults displayed. "I got it," Timothy said proudly, maneuvering himself into the booth. "I'm getting really fast with these. I can see that." "Your balance and coordination are excellent," Emma replied, and Marcus caught something in her tone, not just politeness, but genuine professional assessment. "You seem to know a lot about physical therapy for a waitress," Marcus said, his voice carrying an edge of suspicion mixed with curiosity. Emma's expression flickered for just a moment, a shadow passing across her features before she recovered her professional smile. "I've had some experience with mobility challenges," she replied diplomatically. "Now, what can I get you gentlemen today?" As she took their orders, Marcus found himself studying her hands. They were soft, well-maintained, with calluses in places that suggested activities more complex than carrying plates. When she wrote their order, her penmanship was precise, almost medical in its clarity. "Daddy, she's really nice," Timothy whispered after Emma left for the kitchen. "Yes, she seems." "Adequate," Marcus replied, though his attention kept drifting toward the kitchen, where he could see Emma moving with efficiency that bordered on choreographed. When she returned with their food, Timothy was attempting to open a stubborn packet of crackers, his fine motor skills making the simple task frustratingly difficult. Emma watched for a moment, then sat down beside him. "May I show you a trick?" she asked gently. "Sometimes the angle makes all the difference." She guided Timothy's hands, adjusting his grip with subtle precision that immediately made the task easier. Marcus observed the interaction with growing fascination. Emma's touch was confident, therapeutic, almost like watching a seasoned occupational therapist work with a patient. "There you go. You just needed to engage your thumb muscles differently," Emma explained, and Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. Engage thumb muscles wasn't typical waitress vocabulary. "Are you sure you're just a server here?" Marcus asked directly, his businessman's instincts sensing something wasn't adding up. Emma's cheeks flushed slightly. "I serve food, yes. Is there something wrong with that?" "Nothing wrong with honest work," Marcus replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by her answer. "You just seem to have some interesting skills." "People are full of surprises, Mr. Sinclair," Emma said with a slight smile that could have been interpreted as mysterious or simply polite. The name recognition hit Marcus immediately. "I never mentioned my last name." Emma's eyes widened for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "You're Marcus Sinclair. Your picture was in the business section last week, the medical center expansion. Plus, Timothy mentioned you own several hospitals during his grilled cheese expertise consultation." Smooth recovery, Marcus thought, but not quite smooth enough. This waitress had just revealed she read business news and retained detailed information about medical facilities. His curiosity was rapidly evolving into genuine intrigue. "Daddy, can Emma eat with us?" Timothy asked suddenly. "She knows about thumb muscles and she likes grilled cheese too." Marcus expected Emma to politely decline, but she hesitated, glancing around the nearly empty diner. "If your father doesn't mind, I suppose I could take a short break." "Please join us," Marcus heard himself saying, surprising himself with the genuine invitation in his voice. As Emma slid into the booth across from them, Marcus noticed the way she automatically assessed Timothy's posture, the subtle adjustments she made to his positioning without drawing attention to it. Every instinct told him this woman was hiding something significant, and Marcus Sinclair had built his empire by trusting his instincts about people. "So, Emma," he began, leaning back in his seat with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to getting answers, "what brought you to waitressing at Rosie's?" The question landed like a challenge, and Emma's response would determine whether Marcus's growing suspicions were justified or if he was simply intrigued by an unusually observant server who'd happened to capture his son's heart with genuine kindness. Emma's fork hovered over her salad as Marcus's question hung in the air between them. She could feel his penetrating gaze analyzing every micro-expression, every pause. Timothy, oblivious to the underlying tension, was happily demolishing his grilled cheese with the unself-conscious enthusiasm only children possess. "Life doesn't always go according to plan," Emma replied carefully, taking a measured bite to buy herself time. "Sometimes we end up in places we never expected." "That's remarkably philosophical for someone serving comfort food," Marcus observed, his tone carrying just enough warmth to soften what could have been an accusation. "I prefer to think of it as adaptable," Emma shot back with a slight smile. "It's amazing how much you can learn about people when you're not sitting behind a mahogany desk making assumptions about their intelligence based on their job title." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the subtle verbal jab. "Touché. Though I'd argue that curiosity about someone who discusses thumb muscle engagement with 7-year-olds isn't quite the same as making assumptions." "Fair point," Emma conceded, and Timothy looked up from his sandwich, sensing the adult conversation had taken an interesting turn. "Are you guys having one of those grown-up discussions where you say one thing but mean something else?" Timothy asked with startling perceptiveness. Emma laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "Your son is exceptionally bright, Mr. Sinclair." "He gets it from his mother," Marcus replied automatically, then felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always accompanied thoughts of Claire. She'd been gone for 3 years, but the grief still ambushed him at unexpected moments. Emma noticed the shift immediately. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, with the kind of empathy that suggested personal experience with grief. Marcus studied her face, surprised by the genuine understanding he saw there. "How did you know I was talking about loss?" "The way your voice changed, the slight tension in your shoulders." "Some things are universal, regardless of tax bracket," Emma replied, then seemed to catch herself being too observant again. "You notice a lot for someone who supposedly just brings food to tables," Marcus said, but his tone had shifted from suspicious to intrigued. Timothy had been following the conversation with the intensity of a child who sensed something important was happening. "Emma, do you know about helping people who can't walk good?" The question was innocent, but Emma's reaction was immediate and telling. Her entire body tensed for a moment, her fingers gripping her fork just a bit too tightly. Marcus filed the response away mentally. "I know a little," Emma said carefully. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because sometimes my legs don't work like other kids, and the doctors can't fix it. But when you helped me with the crackers, it felt different. Better somehow." Marcus watched Emma's expression shift through several emotions. Surprise, something that looked like recognition, and then a carefully controlled professional detachment that seemed oddly familiar. "Timothy," Emma said gently, "would you mind if I looked at how you hold things, just to see if there are any little tricks that might help?" She was asking permission from both Timothy and Marcus, but her voice had taken on a tone of quiet authority that made Marcus sit up straighter. This was not a waitress making conversation with a customer. This was someone with actual expertise making a clinical assessment. "Sure," Timothy said eagerly, while Marcus nodded his consent, fascination overriding caution. Emma moved to Timothy's side of the booth. her movements precise and purposeful. She watched him pick up his sandwich, observed his grip on his cup, made mental notes that Marcus could practically see forming behind her focused expression. "Timothy, can you make a fist for me? Good. Now wiggle just your fingers while keeping your thumbs still. Perfect." Her voice had shifted entirely, warm but professional, encouraging but analytical. "Your fine motor control is actually quite good," she continued, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Fine motor control was exactly what Dr. Harrison had discussed during their last appointment, the specific area where Timothy struggled most. "Try this," Emma said, showing Timothy how to position his hand differently when reaching for his cup. "Engage from your shoulder. Let the strength flow down through your arm to your fingers, instead of trying to force it from your wrist." And the change in Timothy's movement was subtle but immediate. His reach was steadier, more controlled. Marcus leaned forward, hardly believing what he was seeing. "How did you know to do that?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Emma froze, realizing she'd revealed too much. I've helped people before, with similar challenges." "What people? Where? And don't tell me you learned this from serving coffee and pie," Marcus pressed, his paternal desperation overriding any concern about politeness. Timothy was practicing his new grip technique, delighted with the improvement, unaware of the charged atmosphere developing between the adults. "It's complicated," Emma said, starting to withdraw. "My son's condition is complicated too," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years of desperate searching. "So please, help me understand how a waitress knows more about his motor skills than specialists from Johns Hopkins." Emma looked at Timothy, still happily experimenting with his improved dexterity, then back at Marcus. Something in his expression, raw hope mixed with barely controlled desperation, seemed to reach her. "I used to work in pediatric rehabilitation," she said quietly, "before I came here." Marcus felt his world shift slightly. "Used to work? Why did you stop?" "Because sometimes the medical world isn't as pure as people believe," Emma replied, her voice carrying a bitter edge that spoke of personal betrayal. "That's cryptic." "It's honest," Emma countered. "Not everything can be solved with money and connections, Mr. Sinclair, even when you own medical centers." The challenge in her voice sparked something in Marcus, not anger, but recognition. Here was someone who spoke to him without deference or manipulation, someone who saw through his wealth and position to address him as simply another person seeking help for his child. "You're right," he said, surprising both of them. "Money can't cure Timothy. 3 years and millions of dollars have proven that. But knowledge can help, experience can make a difference, and right now, you seem to have both." Emma stared at him, clearly not expecting the admission of vulnerability from someone with his reputation for control and dominance. "What exactly are you asking me?" she said cautiously. "I'm asking you to help my son," Marcus replied simply. "Whatever it costs, whatever you need, whatever went wrong in your past, none of that matters if you can make Timothy's life better." Timothy looked up at both adults, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Emma, would you help me walk better? I promise I'll be good and do exactly what you say." Emma's composure finally cracked slightly, emotion flickering across her features. "Timothy, you're already perfect exactly as you are. Any help I might offer would just be tools to make things easier." "So you'll help?" Timothy asked hopefully. Emma looked at Marcus, then back at Timothy, clearly wrestling with a decision that involved more than just physical therapy techniques. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "This is more complicated than you might realize." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing his personal number on the back. "Take all the time you need, but please, consider it. Whatever happened before doesn't have to define what happens next." Emma took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact was electric, unexpected, and both of them pulled back slightly in surprise at the jolt of awareness. "I should get back to work," Emma said, her professional mask sliding back into place, but not quite hiding the flush in her cheeks. As she cleared their plates, Marcus found himself memorizing details about her. The way she moved, the careful control of her expressions, the obvious intelligence she was trying to downplay. Timothy was already asking when they could come back to see Emma again. Marcus Sinclair was accustomed to getting what he wanted through persistence and resources. But something told him that Emma Thompson would require a different approach entirely, one that might challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and what he was willing to sacrifice for the people he loved. 03. 3 days passed before Marcus received Emma's call. He was in the middle of a board meeting discussing quarterly projections with investors from 3 different continents when his personal phone buzzed. Seeing an unfamiliar number, he almost ignored it until something made him step out of the conference room. "Mr. Sinclair, this is Emma Thompson from Rosie's Diner." Her voice was different over the phone, more formal, carefully controlled. Marcus felt his pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Emma, I was beginning to wonder if you'd decided against helping Timothy." "I've been thinking about it," she replied. "A lot. If I agree to work with him, there would need to be conditions." Marcus almost smiled. Of course, there would be conditions. In his experience, the most valuable people always had non-negotiable terms. "I'm listening. First, we do this properly, not as a favor or charity case, but as a professional therapeutic relationship. I'll need to see his complete medical history, consult with his current doctors, and establish a real treatment plan." "Done. What else?" "Second, we work at neutral locations, not your house, not the medical center. Somewhere Timothy can feel comfortable and relaxed." Marcus paused, intrigued by her insistence on boundaries. "Any suggestions?" "There's a community center about 10 minutes from the diner. They have an excellent physical therapy space that they rent by the hour. Clean, well-equipped, but not intimidating." "And the third condition?" Marcus asked, sensing there was more. Emma hesitated. "My past isn't up for discussion. You hired me to help Timothy, not to satisfy your curiosity about why I'm working as a waitress instead of doing what I used to do." The slight break in her voice told Marcus everything he needed to know. Whatever had driven Emma from pediatric rehabilitation to serving coffee had been traumatic enough to leave lasting scars. "Agreed," he said simply. "When can we start?" "Saturday morning, 9 a.m. I'll text you the address." Marcus hung up feeling a mixture of hope and anticipation that had nothing to do with Timothy's treatment and everything to do with seeing Emma Thompson in her element. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Marcus had barely slept, alternating between excitement about potential progress for Timothy and an inexplicable nervousness about seeing Emma again. Timothy, meanwhile, had been talking about nothing but Emma the helper since they'd left the diner. The community center was modest but well-maintained, housed in a converted warehouse with high ceilings and natural light streaming through skylights. Marcus expected to wait, to go through typical preliminary discussions, maybe fill out paperwork. Instead, he found Emma in the physical therapy room, wearing black athletic clothing that revealed toned arms and an athletic build that spoke of serious fitness training. Her hair was pulled back in a functional ponytail, and she was reviewing what appeared to be a detailed folder of documents. "You've been busy," Marcus observed, noting the professional setup, exercise mats, various therapy tools, and what looked like a carefully planned session outline. "I told you, if we're doing this, we're doing it right," Emma replied, looking up with a smile that was warmer than her phone voice had suggested. "Timothy, are you ready to do some work?" "Yes, what kind of work?" Timothy asked eagerly, his crutches tucked under his arms. The fun kind, Emma said with a wink. But first, I need to understand exactly how your body works right now. Is that okay? For the next 30 minutes, Marcus watched Emma conduct the most thorough assessment of Timothy's condition he'd ever witnessed. She was patient but precise, encouraging but analytical, guiding Timothy through movements and exercises while making detailed notes. Her expertise was undeniable. She identified muscle weaknesses and compensatory patterns that previous therapists had missed, asked questions about Timothy's daily activities that revealed insights no doctor had considered, and most remarkably, managed to make the entire evaluation feel like an elaborate game. "Timothy, you're doing fantastic," Emma said as they finished the assessment portion. "Now I want to show you something cool." She guided Timothy to a mat and showed him a series of exercises that looked deceptively simple, but were clearly designed to address his specific neurological challenges. What impressed Marcus most was how Emma modified her approach in real time, reading Timothy's responses and adjusting accordingly. "Feel the difference when you engage your core first?" Emma asked, as Timothy completed a movement with notably better control than his baseline. "Yeah, it's like my whole body works together instead of just my arms," Timothy said, his excitement genuine. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. In 30 minutes, Emma had helped Timothy achieve better motor control than months of conventional therapy. But more than that, she'd given Timothy confidence, made him feel capable rather than limited. "Emma," Marcus said during a break while Timothy was getting water, "where exactly did you train? This level of expertise doesn't happen overnight." Emma's expression shifted, the professional mask slipping back into place. "I told you, my background wasn't up for discussion. Even when it's clearly world-class. Timothy's made more progress in one session than he has in months of traditional therapy. Progress that could disappear if we don't maintain consistency and appropriate boundaries," Emma replied firmly, but Marcus caught the flash of pride in her eyes. Their conversation was interrupted by Timothy's excited voice. "Emma, watch this!" He was attempting the core engagement exercise on his own, his technique imperfect, but his determination absolute. "Excellent work, Timothy. You're getting the hang of it," Emma encouraged, then turned back to Marcus with a softer expression. "He's remarkable, you know. His neural plasticity is exceptional for his condition." "Neural plasticity," Marcus repeated. "That's not basic physical therapy terminology." Emma realized she'd revealed more specialized knowledge and looked away. "I read a lot." "Emma," Marcus said gently, "whatever happened in your past, whatever made you leave medicine, it doesn't change the fact that you have a gift. Timothy responds to you like no other therapist we've worked with. Sometimes gifts come with prices that are too high to pay," Emma replied quietly, watching Timothy practice his exercises with focused determination. Marcus wanted to push for more information, but something in Emma's tone warned him off. Instead, he said, "What matters is that you're helping him now. Thank you." Emma looked surprised by his restraint, as if she'd expected more interrogation about her background. "You're welcome. Same time next week?" "Absolutely. And Emma, whatever you used to do, wherever you trained, you're exactly what Timothy needs now." As they packed up to leave, Timothy hugged Emma goodbye with uninhibited affection. "Emma, you're the best helper ever. Will you be my friend too, not just my teacher?" "Of course, sweetheart," Emma replied, her professional demeanor melting completely in the face of Timothy's innocent request. Marcus watched the interaction, struck by how naturally Emma connected with Timothy, how her walls came down around his son's unguarded enthusiasm. He found himself wondering what it would take to earn that same unguarded response from the mysterious woman who was slowly working miracles with his child. Walking to their cars, Marcus made a decision that surprised him. Instead of pressing Emma for answers about her past, he would earn her trust the same way she was earning Timothy's progress, gradually, consistently, and with genuine respect for the boundaries she needed to maintain. But as he watched her drive away in a modest sedan that somehow seemed as carefully chosen as everything else about her presentation, Marcus Cudden Sinclair found himself hoping that trust would eventually include letting him understand the fascinating, guarded woman who was bringing light back into his son's world. The anonymous email arrived on a Tuesday morning, sliding into Marcus's inbox between quarterly reports and merger proposals like a poisoned dart aimed directly at his heart. The subject line was clinical, professional. Regarding your son's new therapist, urgent medical ethics concern. Marcus almost deleted it as spam until he saw Emma's name in the preview text. His blood ran cold as he opened the message. Mr. Sinclair, I feel compelled to warn you about Emma Richardson, currently using the alias Thompson. 3 years ago, Dr. Richardson was stripped of her medical license following a catastrophic patient death at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Her experimental treatment protocol resulted in permanent paralysis for an 8-year-old patient. The family's lawsuit revealed gross negligence and falsified research data. I'm shocked to learn she's somehow gained access to your son. Please protect Timothy before history repeats itself. A concerned medical professional attached were what appeared to be court documents, medical board findings, and news articles detailing a malpractice case that had destroyed Emma's career and reputation. The photos showed a different woman, professionally dressed, confident, standing beside research awards and speaking at medical conferences. But the face was unmistakably Emma's. Marcus's hands shook as he read through the documents. Emma Richardson had been a rising star in pediatric neurology, a prodigy who'd graduated medical school at 24 and was conducting groundbreaking research on childhood motor disorders. The case that destroyed her involved a treatment she'd developed, administered without proper authorization, resulting in a child's permanent paralysis. The betrayal cut deeper than any business deception Marcus had ever experienced. Emma hadn't just lied about her past. She'd actively deceived him about the very expertise she was using to treat Timothy. How could he have been so blind? How could he have trusted his son's care to someone who'd already destroyed another child's life? His phone buzzed. Emma's name appeared on the screen, a text confirming Saturday's session. The casual normalcy of her message felt obscene in light of what he'd just discovered. Hi, Marcus. Looking forward to Saturday. Timothy's progress has been remarkable. I have some new exercises that should help with his bilateral coordination. See you at 9. Emma Marcus stared at the message, fury and heartbreak warring in his chest. She was still pretending, still maintaining the fiction that she was simply a former pediatric rehabilitation worker instead of a disgraced doctor whose negligence had ruined a family. He called Emma immediately, his business voice cold and controlled, despite the emotional tornado raging inside him. Emma, we need to talk. Now. Not Saturday. Now. Her voice shifted instantly, picking up on his tone. Marcus, what's wrong? Is Timothy okay? Timothy's fine. It's you I'm concerned about, Dr. Richardson. The silence that followed stretched so long, Marcus thought the call had dropped. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. How did you find out? Someone who cares about my son's safety sent me the truth about your previous career. The question is why you didn't. Marcus, please let me explain. Explain what? How you lied about your identity. How you've been treating my son with techniques developed by someone who paralyzed another child. How you've been pretending to be a simple waitress when you're actually a disgraced doctor who lost her license for malpractice. It wasn't malpractice. Emma's voice cracked with 3 years of suppressed pain. The treatment was working. The family was desperate, just like you are. I was trying to save that little girl's mobility, not destroy it. The medical board disagreed. So did the court system. So did the family whose daughter will never walk again because of your arrogance. Emma's sob was audible through the phone. You don't understand what really happened. The case, the evidence, it was all manipulated. I was set up by people who wanted to steal my research, destroy my credibility so they could claim my work as their own. That's convenient, Marcus replied, though something in Emma's desperation gave him pause. Blame a conspiracy when your own negligence destroyed a child's life. I have proof, Emma said desperately. Documents that show what really happened, who was really responsible. I've been carrying this secret for 3 years, afraid to trust anyone because the people who betrayed me have connections everywhere, including in your world. Marcus felt a flicker of uncertainty, but the fury was too strong. Even if that were true, you lied to me. You put my son at risk by hiding your history. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now? Because you've seen the results, Emma pleaded. Timothy's progress is real. My techniques work because they're based on sound science, not the lies that destroyed my career. Please, Marcus, don't let their conspiracy hurt Timothy by depriving him of treatment that's actually helping. The treatment stops now, Marcus said with finality. Don't contact us again. Don't come near my son. If you attempt any further contact, I'll have security remove you personally. He ended the call before Emma could respond, then sat in his office chair feeling hollowed out and betrayed. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below him like a kingdom he no longer wanted to rule. Everything he'd built, all his success and power, felt meaningless in the face of this deception. But even as he tried to process his anger, Marcus couldn't forget Timothy's excitement about his sessions with Emma, the genuine progress his son had made, the light in Timothy's eyes when he talked about his helper Emma. If Emma was truly dangerous, if her treatment was harmful, wouldn't Timothy's condition have worsened rather than improved? The doubt was a splinter in his mind, growing larger with each passing hour. By evening, Marcus found himself reviewing the anonymous email more carefully, noting inconsistencies in the attached documents, questioning the convenient timing of this revelation, just as Timothy was making unprecedented progress. His private investigator, Jackson Mills, arrived at Marcus's penthouse at 9 p.m. with a preliminary report that would change everything. Marcus, whoever sent you this information has connections to some very sophisticated people. The email was routed through servers in 3 different countries, but I managed to trace it back to a law firm that specializes in medical patent disputes. What does that have to do with Emma Richardson? Jackson spread several documents across Marcus's dining table. Doctor. Emma Richardson was working on revolutionary treatment protocols for childhood neurological disorders. Her research was worth millions, potentially billions, if developed into standardized treatments. The day before her malpractice case went to trial, 3 senior colleagues at her hospital filed patents for treatments suspiciously similar to her work. Marcus studied the patent filings, his business mind immediately recognizing the pattern. They wanted her research. More than that, they needed her discredited so thoroughly that she could never challenge their theft. The malpractice case was their weapon. I'm still digging, but preliminary evidence suggests the patient's deterioration wasn't caused by Dr. Richardson's treatment. It was caused by a secondary medication administered by another doctor after her protocol had already shown positive results. The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. Emma hadn't been lying about a conspiracy. She'd been the victim of one. Her colleagues had destroyed her career and reputation to steal her life's work, then systematically buried evidence that would have exonerated her. Jackson, I need you to get me everything. Every document, every witness statement. Every piece of evidence that was suppressed in the original case, and I need it fast. Marcus, this kind of investigation could take months. You have 48 hours, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to moving mountains. Money is no object. Call in every favor, hire every expert, but I need proof of Emma Richardson's innocence by Thursday. After Jackson left, Marcus stood alone in his penthouse, staring out at the glittering city lights and wrestling with the magnitude of his mistake. He'd accused Emma of being a fraud and a danger to his son, when in reality she was a brilliant doctor whose career had been destroyed by the same kind of corporate greed and manipulation that he knew all too well from his own business world. But the damage was done. Emma was gone, Timothy's progress would halt, and Marcus had lost something precious that he was only now beginning to understand. Not just his son's miraculous therapist, but the woman who had somehow become essential to both their lives in ways that transcended medicine. The next morning, Timothy's excited questions about Saturday's session with Emma felt like daggers in Marcus's heart. How could he explain to his 7-year-old son that the woman who'd given him hope and progress had been driven away by his father's fear and prejudice? How could he admit that his need to control and protect had destroyed the best thing that had happened to their family since Claire's death? As he watched Timothy practice the exercises Emma had taught him, maintaining his improved motor control even in her absence, Marcus made a decision that would determine the course of all their lives. He would find the truth, expose the conspiracy that had destroyed Emma's career, and somehow convince the woman he'd wronged so deeply to forgive him. But first, he had to face the possibility that his accusation and rejection had finally driven Emma beyond his reach, that the second chance at healing and love she'd offered might be lost forever because of his failure to trust in the face of fear. By Thursday evening, Marcus had assembled a war room in his private conference area. Documents covered every surface: medical records, court transcripts, financial statements, and phone records that painted a picture of corruption so systematic it took his breath away. Jackson Mills had worked 48 hours straight with a team of investigators, forensic accountants, and medical experts to uncover the truth. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, Emma's former department head, had orchestrated the entire conspiracy with surgical precision. She'd identified Emma's groundbreaking research on neuroplasticity treatments, recognized its commercial potential, and systematically set about stealing it. The plan had required destroying Emma's credibility so completely that she could never challenge the theft. The patient who'd been paralyzed, Sarah Martinez, hadn't suffered complications from Emma's treatment. She'd been given an experimental muscle relaxant by Dr. Hendricks, without Emma's knowledge or consent, a medication that interacted catastrophically with Emma's therapy protocol. Dr. Hendricks had then falsified records to make it appear that Emma had administered the conflicting drug herself. "Marcus, look at this," Jackson said, pointing to financial records spread across the table. 3 days after Emma's license was revoked, Hendricks received a research grant worth $12 million to develop innovative neuroplasticity treatments for children. The grant proposal contains entire sections of Emma's original work, word for word. Marcus felt sick. Emma had been telling the truth about being set up, and he'd been too blinded by fear to believe her. What about Sarah Martinez? Where is she now? That's where this gets interesting. The family moved to Portland 6 months after the settlement. I tracked them down. Sarah's mother agreed to speak with us. What she told my investigator changes everything. Jackson played a recording on his laptop. A woman's voice, heavy with guilt and regret, filled the room. "We knew something wasn't right about the case. Dr. Richardson had been helping Sarah for months, and she was getting better. The treatment was working. Then suddenly she got worse, and Dr. Hendricks said it was because Dr. Richardson had made a mistake with Sarah's medication. But Sarah kept asking for Dr. Richardson, kept saying she wanted her real doctor back. The lawyers convinced us that Dr. Richardson was dangerous, that we needed to sue to protect other children. They promised us money for Sarah's care, but mostly they just wanted us to stay quiet and disappear. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining Emma carrying the weight of this false accusation for 3 years, believing she'd destroyed a child's life when she'd actually been trying to save it. "There's more," Jackson continued. "I found Dr. Richardson's attorney from the original case. The man was scared, Marcus, really scared. He admitted that evidence was suppressed, witnesses were intimidated, and he was basically forced to accept a plea deal that stripped Emma of her license in exchange for avoiding criminal charges." "Oh, criminal charges that were completely fabricated," Marcus said grimly. "Exactly. Dr. Hendricks has connections throughout the medical establishment. She's destroyed at least 3 other promising researchers over the past decade using similar tactics. Emma was just the most successful victim." Marcus stood up, pacing to his windows. The city lights below reminded him of Emma's eyes that first day at the diner, bright with intelligence and shadowed with pain he'd been too blind to understand. Where is Emma now? That's the problem. She's disappeared. Quit her job at the diner, packed up her apartment, left no forwarding address. My sources think she's planning to leave the country, maybe start over somewhere her reputation can't follow her. The thought of Emma fleeing, of losing her forever because of his betrayal, galvanized Marcus into action. Find her. I don't care what it costs or how many people you have to hire. Find Emma Richardson and bring her home. Marcus, even if we find her, getting her to trust you again after what happened. I'll face that when the time comes. Right now, I need to focus on clearing her name and making sure the people who destroyed her life face justice." Marcus spent the next 3 days orchestrating what he privately called Operation Redemption. He used every connection, every favor owed, every ounce of influence he'd accumulated over years in business to systematically dismantle the conspiracy that had destroyed Emma's career. First, he hired the best medical malpractice attorney in the country to file motions for Emma's license reinstatement based on new evidence. Then he arranged for Sarah Martinez's family to be relocated closer to specialized treatment centers, with all expenses paid and a trust fund established for Sarah's continued care. The most satisfying part was arranging Dr. Patricia Hendricks's downfall. Marcus's team presented evidence of her research theft and medical fraud to the State Medical Board, the FBI's white-collar crime division, and 3 different medical journals that had published her stolen work. By Friday afternoon, Hendricks had been arrested, her medical license suspended, and her stolen research grants frozen pending investigation. But none of it mattered if Marcus couldn't find Emma and convince her to forgive him. The breakthrough came on Saturday morning. Jackson called at dawn with news that made Marcus's heart race. "I found her. She's in a small town called Cedar Falls, about 2 hours north of here. She's staying at a bed and breakfast, apparently trying to decide whether to take a job offer from a clinic in Vancouver." Marcus was in his car within 10 minutes, driving through the early morning darkness toward a confrontation that would determine the rest of his life. He'd prepared speeches, practiced apologies, rehearsed explanations of the evidence that proved her innocence. But as he pulled into the parking lot of the Cedarwood Inn, all his preparations crumbled into a single desperate truth. He loved Emma Richardson, and he'd nearly destroyed them both by failing to trust in that love when it mattered most. Emma was sitting on the inn's front porch swing, wrapped in a cream-colored sweater and holding a cup of coffee. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, as if the weight of 3 years of false accusations had finally broken something essential inside her. When she saw him approaching, her expression didn't change. No surprise, no anger, just a weary resignation that broke Marcus's heart. "How did you find me?" she asked quietly. "I have good investigators," Marcus replied, settling onto the porch steps where he could see her face clearly. "Emma, I need you to know that I know the truth now. About Dr. Hendricks, about what really happened to Sarah Martinez, about how you were set up to take the blame for someone else's greed and negligence." Emma's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands. "It doesn't matter now. The damage is done." "It does matter. Hendricks has been arrested. The medical board is reviewing your case for full reinstatement. Sarah Martinez's family wants to meet with you to apologize for their part in the cover-up. Your research is being credited to you, not to the people who stole it." For the first time since he'd arrived, Emma showed emotion, a flicker of hope quickly suppressed. "Even if all of that's true, it doesn't change what you said to me. How quickly you believed I was a danger to Timothy, how easily you threw away what we were building together." Marcus felt the truth of her words like a physical blow. "You're right. I failed you when you needed trust most. I let fear override everything I knew about your character, your integrity, your love for Timothy. I'm not asking you to forget that or pretend it didn't happen." "Then what are you asking?" Marcus looked into Emma's green eyes, seeing past the pain to the woman who'd brought miracles into his and Timothy's lives. "I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove that I can be worthy of your trust. I'm asking you to come home and help me raise Timothy in a world where brilliant, caring people like you are protected and valued instead of destroyed by corrupt systems." Emma was quiet for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Timothy must be wondering what happened to his sessions. He asks about you every day. He's been practicing the exercises you taught him, maintaining his progress even without you there to guide him." But Marcus paused, then decided to risk complete honesty. "But it's not just Timothy who needs you, Emma. I need you. Not as Timothy's therapist or as Dr. Richardson, the brilliant researcher. I need Emma, the woman who challenges me to be better, who sees through my wealth and power to the man I want to become." Emma set down her coffee cup and looked directly at him for the first time since he'd arrived. "Marcus, what are you really saying?" "I'm saying that I love you," Marcus replied simply. "I fell in love with you in Rosie's diner, when you made Timothy laugh while helping him with his crackers. I fell deeper in love watching you work with him, seeing your passion and expertise shine through every interaction. And I realized how much I loved you when I thought I'd lost you forever because of my own fear and stupidity." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling now. The first genuine smile he'd seen since he'd destroyed everything with his accusations and suspicion. "You know this is crazy, right?" she said softly. "A CEO and a disgraced doctor turned waitress. The society pages will have a field day." Marcus grinned, feeling lighter than he had in days. "Let them talk. I own half the media companies in the city anyway. But Emma, if we're going to do this, I have one condition." "Oh, now you have conditions?" Emma asked with a hint of her old teasing tone. "I want you to be Timothy's doctor, not just his therapist. I want you to have your own research lab, your own team, the resources to continue the work that was stolen from you. I want the whole world to know that Dr. Emma Richardson is the brilliant woman who not only healed my son, but somehow managed to heal his broken father as well." Emma stood up from the porch swing and walked over to Marcus, cupping his face in her hands with the same gentle precision she'd used to guide Timothy through his exercises. "That sounds like a pretty good deal, Mr. Sinclair," she said, her voice warm with the love and trust that had almost been lost forever. "But I have a condition too. Anything. Next time someone tries to convince you that I'm dangerous or untrustworthy, you come to me first. You ask me for the truth instead of making assumptions. Can you promise me that?" Marcus covered her hands with his, looking into the eyes of the woman who'd become his second chance at everything that mattered. I promise. And Emma, there won't be a next time. From now on, when the whole world is against you, I'll be standing right beside you, fighting for us. When Emma kissed him, soft and sweet on the porch of a small-town inn, Marcus finally understood what he'd been searching for his entire adult life. Not just success or security or even love, but partnership. Someone who would challenge him, trust him, and build something beautiful together from the ashes of their separate heartbreaks. They had work to do. Timothy was waiting for them both, and Emma's career needed to be fully restored. But for now, holding the woman he loved in the golden light of a new day, Marcus Sinclair finally felt like he'd come home. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, watching Emma work the crowd at her reinstatement celebration with the same natural grace she'd once brought to serving coffee at Rosie's Diner. The medical community had gathered to officially welcome back Dr. Emma Richardson, whose groundbreaking research was now being implemented in pediatric hospitals across the country. "She's remarkable," Dr. Harrison commented, appearing at Marcus's elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone command respect the way she does. Hard to believe 6 months ago she was hiding her identity in a diner." Marcus accepted the champagne, but kept his eyes on Emma as she spoke with a group of neurologists about her latest research protocols. She wasn't hiding. She was protecting herself from people who would have destroyed her all over again if they'd found her. And now? Now she has someone to protect her while she changes the world, Marcus replied with quiet satisfaction. Plus, she's about to become a Sinclair, which comes with its own armor. Dr. Harrison chuckled. "Speaking of which, have you told her about Timothy's latest progress reports? His improvement is being documented for publication in 3 different medical journals." Marcus smiled, remembering Timothy's excitement that morning when Emma had shown him his latest assessment scores. His son was now testing within normal ranges for fine motor control, gross motor coordination, and bilateral integration. The crutches had been retired 2 months ago, replaced by a confidence that transformed everything about how Timothy moved through the world. "She knows, but what she doesn't know is what I have planned for tonight." Across the room, Emma caught his eye and smiled, the same warm, knowing smile that had first captured his attention in that humble diner. She excused herself from her conversation and made her way through the crowd toward him. "Are you hiding from your own celebration?" she asked, slipping her hand into his with natural ease. "I'm not hiding. I'm plotting," Marcus replied, leading her toward the hotel's rooftop garden. "There's something I want to show you." The rooftop had been transformed into a private paradise, with string lights twinkling among carefully arranged flowers and a single table set for 2. Timothy was already waiting, dressed in his best suit and grinning with barely contained excitement. "Surprise!" Timothy called out as they approached. "Dad said I could help with the special dinner." Emma looked between Marcus and Timothy, clearly sensing something important was happening. "What's all this?" Marcus guided her to the table, where 3 place settings indicated this was meant to be a family affair. "Timothy and I wanted to celebrate your reinstatement properly, away from the crowds, just the 3 of us." As they settled into their seats, Timothy could barely contain his excitement. "Emma, guess what? Dad says you're going to be my real mum now, not just my doctor." Emma's eyes widened, looking to Marcus for explanation. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I know we've talked about getting married," Marcus began carefully. "But I realized there was something we'd never properly discussed. Timothy's been asking when you're going to officially become his mom, and I realized I'd been thinking about this all wrong." Emma's voice was soft with emotion. "What do you mean?" I mean that I've been planning a traditional proposal, thinking about romantic settings and perfect speeches, but our love story was never traditional, Emma. It started in a diner with a little boy who needed help and a woman brave enough to provide it despite her own pain. It grew through trust and betrayal and forgiveness. It's not a fairy tale romance. It's something better. It's real. Marcus slipped from his chair and knelt beside Emma, but instead of producing a ring, he gestured to Timothy, who ran to join them. "Emma Richardson," Marcus continued, "will you marry us? Not just me, but our family? Will you be Timothy's mother and my wife, and the partner I want beside me for every challenge and triumph that comes our way?" Timothy pulled a small velvet box from his pocket with ceremonial seriousness. "We picked it out together," he announced proudly. "Dad said it had to be perfect for the perfect mom." Emma opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller emeralds that matched her eyes perfectly. But what made her cry wasn't the beauty of the ring. It was the way Timothy immediately threw his arms around her neck, whispering, "Please say yes, Emma. I already told everyone at school you're my mom." "Yes," Emma managed through her tears. "Yes to marrying you, yes to being Timothy's mother, yes to this beautiful, complicated, perfect family we've somehow created together." As Marcus slipped the ring onto Emma's finger, Timothy cheered with the uninhibited joy that had been missing from their lives before Emma had walked into that diner 6 months ago. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, producing an official-looking document from his jacket. "I've established the Richardson Foundation for Pediatric Research with an initial endowment of $50 million. You'll have complete autonomy to pursue whatever research you think is most important, with resources to hire the best team in the world." Emma stared at the document, then at Marcus, then at Timothy, who was still clinging to her with the fierce affection of a child who'd found his missing piece. "Marcus, this is too much. The foundation, the research lab, all of it." "It's not enough," Marcus interrupted gently. "Emma, you saved my son's life and gave me back my faith in love and partnership. This foundation is just the beginning of what I want to build with you. We're going to change how the world treats children like Timothy, how it supports brilliant researchers like you, how it protects people who dare to innovate and care more about healing than profit." Later that evening, after Timothy had been tucked into bed with stories about their upcoming wedding and promises that nothing would change except that Emma would officially be his mother, Marcus and Emma stood on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the city that had brought them together. "Do you ever think about that first day at Rosie's?" Emma asked, her engagement ring catching the city lights. "Every day," Marcus replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was so arrogant, so certain I could control everything with money and influence. I had no idea that a waitress with mysterious skills and a guarded heart would teach me what real power looks like." Emma leaned back against his chest, finally at peace with her past and excited about their future. "And I never imagined that a demanding CEO with trust issues would become the man who would fight to clear my name and give me back my career and my confidence." "We're quite a pair," Marcus murmured against her hair. The disgraced doctor and the workaholic CEO, brought together by a little boy who needed us both to become whole. "Speaking of Timothy," Emma said with a mischievous smile, "he's been asking when he's going to get a little brother or sister. Apparently, having one parent who's a doctor and one who owns hospitals means we should be able to make perfect babies." Marcus laughed, the sound rich with happiness and possibility. "That boy has been through enough medical terminology to last a lifetime. But Emma, when you're ready, when we're ready as a family, I can't think of anything I'd love more than watching you bring new life into this world we're building together." 6 months after that, Doctor. Emma Sinclair stood in the research lab of the Richardson Foundation, her hands resting on her growing belly as she watched Timothy help her research assistant organize data from their latest clinical trial. Their treatment protocols were now being used in 47 hospitals worldwide, helping hundreds of children achieve mobility and independence their parents had never dreamed possible. Marcus appeared in the lab doorway, still wearing his suit from a board meeting, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, the look of a man who'd learned to balance professional success with personal happiness. "How are my 3 favorite people today?" he asked, kissing Emma's cheek and ruffling Timothy's hair with equal affection. "Timothy's been helping me calculate success rates," Emma replied, her hand automatically finding Marcus's as they watched their son, brilliant, confident, and walking without any assistance, explain statistical analysis with the enthusiasm of someone who'd inherited both parents' intelligence and determination. "And baby sister is practicing her soccer kicks," Timothy announced, placing his small hand on Emma's belly with the gentle reverence of an older brother already deeply in love with his sibling. Marcus knelt beside his family, his hand joining Timothy's on Emma's stomach, marveling at the life growing there. A life that represented not just their biological connection, but everything they'd overcome to build this extraordinary partnership. "We're going to have to expand the lab," Emma said with mock seriousness. "Between Timothy's research assistants and this little one's eventual contributions to pediatric medicine, we're going to need more space." "Whatever you need," Marcus replied, and Emma knew he meant it with the same absolute commitment he'd shown when he'd fought to clear her name, when he'd proposed to their entire family, when he'd stood beside her through every challenge and triumph since that day in Rosie's diner. Looking at her husband, her son, and the foundation they'd built together, Dr. Emma Sinclair understood that miracles weren't just medical breakthroughs or unexpected recoveries. Sometimes miracles were simply love that refused to give up, trust that survived betrayal, and second chances that transformed not just individuals but entire families, communities, and ultimately the world itself. Outside the lab windows, the city spread before them like a promise, a place where a waitress could become a respected doctor again, where a guarded CEO could learn to trust completely, where a little boy's need for healing could bring together 2 broken hearts and make them whole. The miracle touch that had started it all lived on, not just in Emma's healing hands, but in every life their love had transformed, every challenge they'd overcome together, and every hope they held for the future they would continue building, one act of courage and compassion at a time.